show all board members are present.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. At this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Julie Foster, who will present a short presentation this evening on the public hearing, reminding the community watching that the board set the public hearing last board meeting. And so, Ms. Foster, the floor is yours.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is the board resolution for the conveyance of land adjacent to Avenue G. Be it resolved, the Council Bluffs Board of Education approved the conveyance of interest in real property located on 5 parcels adjoining Wilson Middle School. That will be the resolution. And the background for this resolution, the district had a formal survey of the property completed in the spring of 2024. This is the property where Wilson Middle School and the Wickersham Athletic Complex sit. The surveyor recommended that the property interest be clarified and that the legal property line be established at the fence line. The next slide will show the picture of that. And Allers and Cooney, our legal counsel, has prepared the documentation to convey the district's interest in this property. So as you can see, this is an overview of the lots next to Wilson Middle School and next to the entrance to the WIC. If you go from the far right, lot number 6, we own that lot. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then there's a small partial road that dead ends, and then another lot 6. Those are all separate parcels. Lot 4 was previously adjusted when that property was sold, I believe it was 4 years ago. And now we would like to adjust the rest of the property line to reflect the fence line. When the surveyor did the work and surveyed this property, our interest between that green line, which is the current legal description, and the fence line, it's really unclear who officially owns the land. On the properties to the right, that strip of land is classified by the city as an alleyway. We each have an equal interest in that land. On number 6 on the far left side, that strip of land is actually classified, the tax assessor described it as no man's land, where we could all have an interest in that. So what we are proposing is that the district convey their interest in this land, because we don't officially own it, but we do have an interest in it, in a non-warranty deed, so a deed without warranty, to those property owners. That way, it's clarified who owns the land, who is responsible for the upkeep and the liability of that land, and it will make it easier if these homeowners want to sell their property in the future. This work will already be completed. So the benefits, it returns this land to the tax rolls. It clarifies the boundary between the district property and the parcels of land. And both the district and the parcels, we all have claim to this property, but we want to convey this interest, make it very clear that it's theirs, and have our property start at the fence line. Other questions?
The line you were talking about on number 4, if you go back a couple slides, that's the one that the board approved to grant a few years back. Is that where the new line's going to start, or is it the existing fence line across the properties?
It's the existing fence line. If you look, the fence is not fully equal around here. It starts up here and it takes a little dip down here. So the new line is going to follow that fence line that's there.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board?
And this relieves us from any liability that would happen on that property as of now, with the garages and...
Yes, once the board has voted to approve it, the paperwork is signed and recorded with the city, then it's theirs and our hands are off it.
I'm not certain liability was an issue. We don't own it. We just have an interest in it. So I don't know if liability would have been a concern.
It probably wouldn't be, but it's best to have these things clarified.
Anything else? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on the conveyance of real property? Okay. Thank you very much for your attendance. I now close this public hearing session. And now I call to order the regular business meeting of the Council Bluffs Community School Board. Ms. Ostrowski, please call our roll.
Mr. Kazire.
Present.
Mrs. Greiner.
Present.
Ms. Hardeman.
Present?
Ms. Myers.
Here.
Dr. Rosello.
Present.
Mr. Peters.
Here.
Mr. Tripp.
Here. And if you would all please stand and join with me, a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. The pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That brings us to approval of our agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move the approval of our agenda as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up, we have approval of minutes for a work session and workshop meetings of September 10th, 2024. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approves the minutes from the work session and workshop meetings of September 10th, 2024, as presented.
Thank you.
I will second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? As there's none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we have public participation. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board regarding agenda items or other matters of concern. We do have one member of the public who would like to speak. Mr. Tony Remaker, would you like to come up?
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I would like to say first, thank you for the work that you do. I've worked with a good number of school boards over the past probably 22 years, and I know that your job is difficult and you get a lot of criticism. I am not that guy. I'm not going to criticize you. I'm not going to draw attention to anything that's bad. What I'm going to talk to you about are things that are good for the district. I did have a conversation just a little bit ago with two wonderful gentlemen that are going to give you a presentation on school safety. So I'm not going to steal their thunder. What I would like to talk to you about are some very specific things in regards to school safety. And the reason I'm able to come up here and talk to you about this, and I'm not going to give you a curriculum vitae, but I am an SRO, School Resource Officer. I'm an instructor for the National Association of School Resource Officers. I'm the president of our Nebraska State Association of School Resource Officers. I'm a member of the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, and I'm a site assessor through School Shield. So I have a little bit of knowledge and experience behind my statements. First and foremost, the most important and effective tool that we have to eliminate targeted school violence is a behavioral threat assessment and management protocol. Council Bluffs does have a BTAM process in place. I would like to just emphasize the necessity of a multidisciplinary threat assessment team. Multidisciplinary threat assessment teams consist of law enforcement, psychologists or psychiatrists, social workers, counselors, at least one administrator from the school itself, and one person that has a little bit more of an intimate knowledge of the subject in question. And that could be a homeroom teacher. If they're in elementary school, it could be their primary teacher. It could be a coach. It could be somebody like that. The importance of that is that you get a 360-degree view of that person, okay? There should always be at least 2 threat assessment meetings. One is the preliminary, where you gather the things that you know and identify the things that you don't know. And that's the important part usually. Sometimes you are able to act immediately if it's either a very high threat or a very low threat. The second meeting is generally for the moderate threats. So my understanding is that that is either in place or in the works. It will happen very quickly, so I applaud you for that. There's a lot of school districts that don't have the first clue about what a threat assessment is. So great job on that. The thing that we didn't get to discuss because we ran out of time is an anonymous reporting system. I don't know if Council Bluffs has an anonymous reporting system. If you do, you do.
We do.
Excellent. The thing that I've seen as the weak point in the anonymous reporting systems is, well, two things, I should say. One is the follow-up, where every single anonymous tip is followed up and investigated until there is no question. I know in my district, when I got there, we were falling short on that, but it takes a very small amount of time to completely overrun that and get it to where it needs to be. In dealing with that anonymous reporting system is the relationships with our kiddos. As much as I would like to tell you that I know what goes on in my school, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't, but I know who does, and it's our kids. Our kids are out there, they're talking to each other, they're talking about each other. They are the rumor mill, and the rumor mill is where we get most of our good information. So the relationships that you have with your kids is paramount to success and stopping not only school violence, but bullying, drug use, mental health issues as well. And when I say mental health issues, I'm talking about budding Axis 1 diagnoses, where you have schizophrenia that's starting to pop up earlier and earlier in even 15 and 16-year-olds. You have bipolar disorder that's creeping in. Anxiety and depression, I don't think I have to say anything more about that. There's so many of our kids that deal with that. But the kids know. So getting those kids involved in that anonymous reporting system, putting the word out. Your SROs are fantastic tools for that, or they should be. Your SROs should have great relationships with all of your kids, especially the kids that are kind of the fringy kids that, for example, from Columbine, the fringy kids were the skaters. Frank DeAngelis, the now retired principal from Columbine, approached them first because he realized that that was his weakness. He was focusing on the kids that did a lot of good things, focusing on the athletes, the academic stars, the band kids, the choir kids, but not the fringe kids. So that's where I would like to see the focus kind of shift. And if I can encourage our SROs to do that on the Iowa side, I would absolutely love to do that. Overall, I feel that you guys have a pretty good guy in the back of the room there that is pretty open-minded and puts in some hard work. I also know that guys can get overwhelmed. I'm in a district with 8 schools that I manage myself, and I can't imagine having as many schools as you guys have over here on the Council Bluffs side under the umbrella of one guy, ultimately. So, I would like to kind of shift gears for just a second and talk about some best practices. Like I said, I like to offer solutions.
14
but-
seconds, please.
If you could.
It's up to Mr. Tripp, but
Go ahead.
Okay.
You're limited to 5 minutes, but I'll give you an extra.
Okay, my wife will tell you I'm a long talker, so keep me to a time limit if you want. Gosh, now I lost my train of thought. Best practices. Thank you. Who said that? I appreciate you. Best practices. So, in the wake of all of the school shootings that are happening, the best practices that we use are found in Standard Response Protocol and Standard Reunification Method, which Council Bluffs has gone to. One of the things that is recommended through SRP, but it's not really taught through SRP, I am also an instructor for SRP and SRM, is the policy of all doors always locked. There's never been a school shooter that has breached a properly locked door. So If teachers want to keep their doors open but locked, absolutely. We don't want our schools to be prisons. We want our teachers to feel comfortable. We want our kids to feel comfortable, but we also want to be able to shut that door and not have to worry about pushing a button, turning a key, anything like that. Because the first thing that leaves our ability under stress is fine motor skills. Finding a key, turning a key, even pushing a button and turning the lock is almost impossible under stress. So all doors always locked, best practice. Most of the schools, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you probably have this already, of security systems at the schools. Most security systems have the ability, just like at your home systems, for armed stay. So what does that do? When a door opens, you hear the little bing, right? Commercial systems also have the ability to send text messages when a door is ajar. And you can set the time frame that you want for the door to be ajar, whether it's 30 seconds, 3 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever it is.
Yeah, we have it.
And is that in use?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I don't have anything else to say then. You shut me down. I mean, it's hurtful, but I'll go in the back and I'll cry a little bit and I'll be okay.
Thank you, Tony.
And if there's anything that I can do to help you guys, you have my information. My passion is keeping kids safe. I'm set to retire in July, so I'll have plenty of time on my hands if you want to use me. Feel free. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Any other member of the public who wishes to come up and speak tonight? Seeing as there is none, we will move on to our superintendent's report. Dr. Murillo.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. At this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Colmine to the podium. We have some students to recognize this evening. It is always a great pleasure to have our students here and award them with their stars for the excellent work that they do. And so, Ms. Colmine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Murillo. Super excited tonight to recognize some academic achievers as our star students. So I'd like to invite Dr. Murillo and President Mr. Tripp to the front.
Eat plastic.
Perfect. Okay. So our first academic recognition is regarding a National Merit semifinalist. So academic success comes naturally for Ashlyn McAuliffe. The Abraham Lincoln High School senior was named a semifinalist in the National Merit Scholarship Program, an academic competition for recognition and scholarships that began in 1955. Once high school juniors take the PSAT, the National Merit Scholarship Corporation calculates the annual selection index scores. Approximately 1.5 million high school students enter the program each year, and only 16,000 students with the highest index score qualify for recognition as a semifinalist. Ashlyn also has an ACT score of 35, a 4.4 GPA. She participates in the Early College Academy program and will graduate with an associate's degree from Iowa Western Community College this spring. This academic standout also devotes her time to multiple extracurricular activities. She is the president of the student body, a member of Student Council, National Honor Society, Technology Student Association, and band. She is also a leader in the band this year, serving as drum major. Ashlyn plans to study computer science in college. She has been accepted to Drake, Iowa State, University of Iowa, and University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Congratulations, Ashlyn. We also had the opportunity to learn about the advanced placement offerings and participation during last month's board meeting, or actually earlier this month's board meeting. And tonight, I am pleased to introduce you to some of our students who have earned a special designation based on their achievements on the AP exams, also known as our AP Scholars. Through college-level courses and exams, Advanced Placement provides motivated and academically prepared students with the opportunity to earn college credit and to stand out in the college admissions process. We have 13 honorees from the 2023-24 school year that are designated as AP Scholars, and we are very fortunate to have some of them with us tonight. This first group of students achieved the designation of AP Scholar, receiving scores of 3 or higher on 3 or more AP exams. With us tonight is Lexi Nelson, Kaya Schleifman, Joshua Templeman, and Grace Vett. The following student earned the designation of AP Scholar with honors for receiving an average score of at least 3.25 on all AP exams taken and scores of a 3 or higher on 4 or more of these AP exams. Receiving the AP Scholar with honors is Dutch Smith. The following student earned the designation of AP Scholar with distinction for receiving an average score of at least 3.5 on all AP exams taken and scores of 3 or higher on 5 or more of these AP exams. And this award goes to Blake Haggerty. And we are very fortunate to have Mrs. Bellows, the high school principal at Abraham Lincoln High School, and also Mr. Chris King is an assistant principal at Thomas Jefferson High School with us tonight. And real quickly, we had one student who was able to make it after we've started. So let's go ahead and back this truck up a little bit. So this student was designated as an AP Scholar, receiving scores of 3 or higher on 3 or more AP exams, and so excited that Jack Walter was able to be here tonight. Congratulations, students, and we would like to publicly thank our Council Bluffs Schools Foundation for sponsoring our star students once a month. Thank you, Dr. Merlo and President Tripp, for your help tonight.
I closed it, so. so it kicked me out. Yeah, it just happens. Yeah, that was the goal.
Yeah.
What a wonderful evening, and great to celebrate our students. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Stile to the podium. I'm really excited tonight that we're able, I know last spring we did a safety update, but I really wanted to bring back our, district safety and security update and allow Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Stile to be able to update not only our school board, but our school community and our parents and family members in our community. So, Mr. Hamilton, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Murillo, and thank you, Board. I know it was mentioned earlier that it was the work of me. This is really, while it is a lot of work, and I'm very proud of the work that's been done, we have great partnerships with all of our law enforcement agencies, including Council Bluffs Police, Carter Lake Police, the Sheriff's Department. John Stile and I have, I think, really done a great job of teaming up to make this work. We had a very high compliment this summer. We had a school district calling, and I said, they were asking, hey, can we come and meet with you guys and see what you guys do about school safety? And I was like, how did you get our number? You're always a little skeptical. And they said, it was a local school district, and they said, well, we worked with the Council Bluffs Police, and they said, if we're going to change some things and try to bolster our safety, we should come talk to you. So John and I got to spend some time this summer talking to another school district. So tonight we're really going to focus on 3 areas. Giving you information on school safety isn't just one thing. You can't just do one thing to make schools safe. It's a multifaceted approach. So tonight we're going to talk about our caring and trained staff. We're going to talk about our emergency preparedness, and then John will talk more about our security systems. So as you know, I have, when we talk about caring and trained staff, I have many times stood up here and talked about our trauma-informed care and talking about having a trusted adult within our buildings. Studies show that when you have a trusted adult, not only does it reduce violence and reduce bullying within your school, but it also makes it easier for students to report to adults when things are happening. Like mentioned earlier by the school resource officer, we know that when we have kids who have a trusted space, who have someone they can come to, they are reporting a lot of things before they ever happen, which is really great. We've also done training on our emergency operation plans. We were, many years ago, looked at our emergency operation plans and said, these need to be living and breathing documents. They need to work with our schools. I'm going to go into them a little more in detail later, but emergency operation plans are really important. Then the safety assessments. We've lumped our safety assessments into, there's actually 2 different ones that we do. We have a self-harm assessment, and we have the threat assessment. We're very fortunate that we've provided training to a number of our staff within our buildings, because we thought when we first started this work, we had a centralized threat assessment team, and it wasn't available to always go out to schools in a timely manner. So we have numerous staff trained, including all of our school resource officers, all of our counselors, therapists, administrators, all of our Green Hills AA staff are trained in our threat assessment processes. And then our entry and visitor management procedures. Our doors, and John will I'm not going to steal his thunder, but John will talk about this a little more. Our doors are locked during the day. We have to buzz in, as many of you know if you've visited. We are continually working with our staff to make sure that they're following our procedures, they're asking why people are there, and they're taking them through our visitor management system before any adult that isn't a staff member gets within our building. Also important in this caring and trade staff is we have a lot of support personnel within our buildings. Not only do we have our counselors and our student family advocates and graduation coaches and our therapists, which those are really important for meeting the social emotional needs of kids. We know kids are crying for help sometimes, and so these are support staff who are instantly available to support kids. But also the work of our school resource officers. We have 5 school resource officers at every one of our secondary buildings. And I will say they do, if you've spent time in our buildings, you'll see they're talking to kids, they're building relationships with those kids, and that's why we have school resource officers. And then we have security guards at both of our high schools.
Kicked him out.
If that slide had been up just one more second, I could have talked about it, but. So when we talk about our emergency operation plans, it's important to know they're school-specific. Each school is in a different area within the community. Each school has its own hazards, whether you're by a creek, in Carter Lake where you have a airport, by a railroad crossing. So the plans are very school-specific. What in the area could be a hazard, and then how are we going to address it if something happens? They're updated regularly. Twice a year, I work, usually it's the SOMs within the building who are responsible for it. I work with the SOMs to make sure that their plans are updated and ready to go. The plans provide an opportunity to review and practice what's going on. They are living and breathing documents. The plans are also shared with our local agencies. So you might ask yourself, why do we do this? Why do we have these plans? Why do we prepare? Why do we practice? The reason why we do it is we want to make sure our staff know what to do in case of an emergency. We hope an emergency never happens, but we want them to know what to do in case an emergency happens. We want our students to know what to do in case an emergency happens. So that's why we have these plans, and that's the next step that I'll talk about is our standard response protocol. So we have partnered with our police department. We were the first school district in the area to follow the standard response protocol within the Iowa side. The Nebraska metro area that were before us. I am happy to report, when I talked to the SRO earlier, I said, the standard response protocol is not only here, but it's in every school in Potawatomi County. The Council Bluffs Police Department has done a great job with the trainers of this. So we follow the standard response protocol, which is really, we have 5 actions that we have in case there's an emergency within a building. It's important to note that we have a calendar of drills that I develop each year. So the calendar of drills has all of these 5 things on it. We start doing the drills in early September. We average about 2 a month, and we do them all through the school year. So a lockdown, as you probably know, is when there is imminent threat within the building. So we lock down the schools, kids lock the doors, lights are off, they're out of sight. We have 3 lockdown drills scheduled each school year. Secure is if there's a threat outside of the school. Our schools are always insecure. The difference between when we actually call a secure and what we normally do is when we call a secure, badges aren't able to get in. We're not letting anybody in the building. So if a parent were to come, we would say, I'm sorry, we're insecure. We wouldn't let anybody in. We practice 2 of those. Each school does 2 of those drills each year. Evacuate, typically our evacuation drills are fire drills. You're leaving the building. We did have a building earlier this year that had a chemical smell, or I think it was a chemical smell.
It was
right?
gas.
Gas.
Natural
gas. So that they follow the evacuation procedures. Typically, fire alarm goes off and it's the fire alarm. But in that case, the fire alarm didn't go off, so we had to call evacuate. It's the same process. Part of the evacuation is each building also identifies 2 spots where if they needed to relocate, they could go to 2 off-site spots. So each school has 2 of those. Shelter, we do 4 times a year. Typically, this is our weather drills. We actually correspond with the National Weather Day in March for tornadoes. We do 4 of those a year. And then hold. Most of our schools, whenever we have to do a hold, and it's interesting that hold is one of the most real life scenarios that we have to work on. Real life scenarios that we have within a school. Typically they're for medical emergencies, and we just need the hallways clear so we can get to where we need to go. So we'll call a hold, business as usual within the building, but we do practice that 2 times. Each one of those drills is documented. We have what we call our drill database. Each one of those, whether you are doing training with your staff, a drill, or a real life event, we expect the school to go in and document that they did that. As part of that documentation, there's a piece to say, what do we need to do to get better? What do we need to do different? And it's very interesting to go through those. I send those out, I resend them out to the school each quarter, just because I think it's interesting to see how they get better throughout the year. Now I will turn it over to Mr. Stile to talk a little bit about facilities and technology.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. It's with great pleasure tonight, Board, I get to bring this, the facilities and tech improvements to you. So over the last couple years, you have authorized over $2.6 million for our video surveillance, our access and control, and our intrusion detection programs. In addition, We have $12,000 annually put towards our T-Pass or our identification management system. So there's been a large investment. When you get to our security vestibules, I was going back through quite a few of the board docs and looking through. We average between $68,000 and $120,000 building secure vestibules. What are our security vestibules? It means you have to go through 2 locked doors before you can get into our office. It also means you can't get out of our office until you're buzzed out. So if you've ever been to the schools, you'll notice the students can flow in from the building to the office, but you can't get out unless you're buzzed out. That really adds a security, a physical security. In addition, if you come up to the building, and there's a couple caveats. One, if you're a parent that's there every day and they know you, they're probably not going to ask you, why are you here? However, if they don't know you, they're going to ask, hey, why are you at our building? And that includes the Jimmy John's guy. I've seen it happen. And so they got to state your business, and they're going to give you access to that first door on the security vestibule, and then you're going to walk through that, and typically the admin assistant can then look out into the security vestibule now that you've come off the video camera and into the first secure, and they're going to be able to see what kind of things do you have in your hands, what's going on, what are you wearing. So once they buzz the second door, you come into the office. At that point, you're going to go through the T-Pass system, which is going to run a background check that's going to tell you if you have any outstanding felons or if there's any other type things that wouldn't allow you to come into our building. If you go through that and you pass, you're going to be issued a badge. Now that badge is actually a sticker. And on that sticker, it gives you the date, time, and where you're going. That's very important because when our staff see you in an area of the building you shouldn't be in, they're going to ask you to come back to the office and escort you there. The access monitoring alerts. This is what's been really emphasized for my department over the last couple years. But we're able to, our doors, like Mr. Hamilton said, they are locked at all times with 2 exceptions. Some buildings choose at arrival and dismissal to allow those front doors to be open. Some of you may have seen that. However, there is always staff there monitoring those doors when that's going on. So that's very, very important. After arrival and or dismissal, those doors lock again, and you cannot get in that building because the doors are all locked. Now, how do we know the doors are all locked? We monitor the doors. Like our front doors, there's a certain timer that tells us if that door's been propped. Some doors tell us immediately. So that is very, very secure on that. We get alerts, and those go to the security team throughout the building when those parameters are met. Another piece that isn't talked a lot about, but we have a securely monitoring tool. And that kind of tells us via email and website usage if the students are having some issues. If there's something on there that's a concern, it could be self-harm, it could be something of a threat. And when that happens, I get an alert, we notify principal and Mr. Hamilton, and there's actions taken. After the school day, that we monitor the buildings after everybody's gone home. We have intrusion detection. So believe it or not, we still want to secure them. And so the police, fire, and or whatever, if someone gets in the building, if there's a fire, because we do want to protect the buildings, because we want them to be there in the morning. At this time, I'll turn it back to Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, so I know I've reported on the Safe and Sound Iowa in the past, but Safe and Sound Iowa is our anonymous reporting system. The benefit we have with that, because we had a different system before, quite honestly, that was any reports were sent to Diane and myself or to, I can't remember, I think Mr. Stowe was on it at one point in time. The hard part with that is if I'm not sitting in front of my computer, Diane's not sitting in front of her computer, we don't get it. We want all of our kids and our parents to be able to call a principal, to call an administrator, to call their caring adult or email them to report anything that's going on. But we know, because I've seen it in the now over a year we've had the Safe and Sound Iowa, a lot of these people are doing it at night when they're having conversations with their kids and they're reporting social media posts or they're reporting a kid said this. So this is a great tool for us because, honestly, because it's free is nice, but because it's monitored 24 hours a day. And if there's a threat or something that we think needs immediate assistance, This goes directly to the police department. So they have it set up that while I receive an email and the building principal receives an email, it also goes to the sergeants. So they have all of the sergeants with the Council Bluffs Police Department on there. So it goes directly to them. And because we have a great relationship with the police department, I'm typically on the phone with them and we're finding out what we're going to do because of that. This can be done through anonymously, or it can be, they can leave their name, but it can be done through the app, through a text, through email, or just through a phone call. Couple things that I wanted to reiterate. If you look at your board policies that are really, we have a few board policies around school safety. So 522 is employee and school safety. There's some administrative regulations that go along with that. And then 512 is our student code of conduct. As you know, you approved that last school year. The code of conduct has leveled behaviors and interventions. There's 5 different levels of behaviors and then appropriate interventions that we would put. For example, a level 1 behavior is a tardy to class, so that might be a phone call to a parent, that might be an email to a parent, it might be that you have to serve a detention after school. A level 5 behavior is if you're performing terroristic threats, if you bring a gun to school, those types of things, that's a level 5 behavior, which is the consequence could be up to expulsion. All of them, we have support staff in place to help a kid, because when kids make bad decisions, we obviously want to work them through it, because even if they're expelled, they're generally going to come back to us at some point in time. So providing them the assistance that they need so they can change their behavior is really what we're trying to do. So I know I've said a lot of good things about the security that we have, but it's ever changing. We can't rest. We've had instances with schools where we've had to go in and retrain, and that's great. We reteach kids, we're going to reteach schools. The landscape is always changing. The technology that's come out in the last 4 or 5 years has been amazing. So some of the things that we're looking forward to and that we're doing to make sure that we are staying on the cutting edge and doing everything we can to keep our staff and students safe. There's a Pot County Threat Assessment Team, which is being led by Sergeant Hernandez from the Council Bluffs Police Department. It includes the police department, all of the schools within the area, and then their local law enforcement agencies. So the Sheriff's Department, Carter Lake Police, any other law enforcement agency. We actually have our first meeting with them this Thursday. This group came out of another group that we did in the spring. We were very fortunate that we were able to participate in some tabletops with those same agencies, where we actually did an active shooter tabletop. We included our hospitals in there, and each of our administrators was able to go to this tabletop that took about a half a day for each. We did it by level, so we did an elementary one, a middle school one, a high school one. I think it was really eye-opening for our administrators, for our team, and really for law enforcement, because we're getting everybody on the same page. So we're going to continue this work once a month with that threat assessment team. Some technology updates that we're looking at. Like I said, the technology companies have really seen what schools are trying to do. The work that we have isn't as up-to-date technology-wise as we could have it, so we're looking at a few different tools that, one, house all of our information in one area, and two, some real-life communication tools that provide two-way communication is one thing that we're really looking at, instant two-way communication, and then even personal panic button type scenarios where when you see an event happen, you're able to communicate that right away and get help right away, because we will know where that location is. So those are some of the technology things that we're looking at. I'm going to let John talk a little bit more about the Homeland Security Grant, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, so we were very fortunate that we received the Homeland Security Grant, which is another $750,000 that is going to allow us to add more additional cameras. Those cameras have the capability, and I recently just found this out, they can do shot detection for us, user detection, and weapon detection. So those would be cameras that we'd be able to move around and definitely have those on the outside of the campus. So that's pretty exciting. And then we have noticed that there's 3 or 4 schools that needed some work on the doors. They're starting to rust and deteriorate, and before they become a problem for us, this grant will allow us to upgrade them. With that, I'll turn it back over. I think we're close, aren't we?
Dr. Murillo said we had up to an hour, so I know nobody wants to go to the AL volleyball games. So with that, we would welcome any questions.
I had a couple of questions we've kind of talked about a little bit as a board, but more kind of for the general public. We've talked a little bit about metal detectors as well, that in some cases they can be a benefit, but in a lot of times they cannot be. I was wondering if you could possibly go into detail about that a bit?
I will just say from the research that I have, there's two sides of it.
Yeah.
There's the safe and secure side of it. The hard part for, I think, most school districts is the psychological piece of it and turning our, like the gentleman said earlier, turning our schools into, you're hardening them, but are you turning them into more of a prison?
Yeah.
And honestly, studies around how it creates a false sense of security because our buildings are open and we want our buildings to be open. So if you're not there 24 hours a day with that metal detector, it maybe creates that false sense of security. But there's two sides of that coin.
And then I had one other question that we've also talked about. There's the thing probably I hear from parents the most when it comes to school safety is they always want to be notified as soon as possible. And I agree, as a parent, being notified of that is very important. However, that's also a very difficult situation given what happens if, say, like an ambulance is called or the police are involved. Could you possibly go a little bit into detail as far as what happens with notification? Because typically that doesn't happen until after a police report is completed, right?
Depending, I don't know that I'm the expert on this, and Diane does most of our communication out. So.
No, Tim, he's talking about what's the time span? It's kind of like when we were looking at the non-credible threat at Wilson, and when we arrived at the home, there were non-English speaking adults there.
Yes.
And waiting on a interpreter slows down us being able to respond. Once the police show up on site, we get behind them, they take the lead, which means that we can't draw a conclusion or provide that final information until they're done, which sometimes is really a concern for parents because they want to know right then, but we don't have the answer until they tell us exactly what that is. So the communication and the timeliness of it sometimes can be quicker than others. And so we really, what the main thing I'd want to tell the community is that if it's an internal investigation, we can move quicker. But once our law enforcement gets involved, we get behind them and let them do their work. And that means we trust and we stay and we wait until they provide us with that information, which means sometimes it's not by 7:30 we know when the post was made maybe at 5 a.m. We know at 9 o'clock because they had to get someone that could speak the language before that interaction with the police department could start.
Thank you. Yep, that was exactly it. Thanks.
Good job, Dr. Murillo.
Anything else from the board?
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Stiles. Appreciate that update.
And that can conclude our report, and good luck to AL tonight.
And that brings us to our business section of our agenda with our resolutions. So we will go ahead and get started on this. First up is a resolution for the conveyance of district interest in 5 parcels. Is there a motion?
I move that the Council Bluffs Board of Education approves the conveyance of interest in real property located on 5 parcels adjoining Wilson Middle School.
I will second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? Seeing as there is none, Ms. Ostrowski, please call our roll.
Yes. Mr. Kozier.
Yes.
Mrs. Greiner.
Yes.
Ms. Myers.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Mr. Tripp.
Yes,
Dr. Rosello.
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman.
Yes.
and the motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have approval of standing committees. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approves the standing committees as presented.
I will second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I had one thing I noticed on the policy.
That is a good question.
Mrs. Zello or Dr. Zello, could you?
Oh, sorry. On the policy committee, the board members are missing. There's 2 board members that are present in that committee, and they are not included on the list.
They should be.
Yep.
So Diane will add. Thank you.
Yes, please.
I just really want to thank Diane for publicizing our committees this year. I really thought it was great and a good opportunity to go back out to the community and ask them to join. It's 5 committees. Some meet more than once a year, some meet more than 2 times, some only meet twice a year. But it's just really great to have our community members sit on those committees.
I noticed that as well when I reviewed the list, that it was nice to see the expanded membership of them.
Excellent. Anything further? All right, we have a motion and a second. No further discussion. Of note, there is a small clerical change that will be corrected, adding 2 board members. As it's just a clerical change, no amendment needs to be made. Mrs. Straussky, please call our roll.
You bet. Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Dr. Ozello?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Next, we have purchase of headphones for elementary schools. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approves Howard Technology for the purchase of up to 3,000 headphones with microphones for $42,000 as presented.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion regarding the purchase of 3,000 headphones for our elementary schools?
Yes.
Yeah, if we could talk.
Thank you. I'll give a little background. It is a new program that the state has pushed out, which will be free. Our principals will learn about it tomorrow, but we wanted to make sure that if they do want to participate, that we have the headphones. So Mark is saying, shh, because we haven't rolled this out yet, but I do think we've seen data, and Dr. Matthews and Mr. Schultz has really dug into this, and it is something that was an opportunity. As you noticed on the board item, it does say up to 3,000, because we will only purchase for those schools that would like to pilot it this year.
Excellent. Any other questions, comments from the board? Mrs. Straussky, please call our roll.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Dr. Ozello?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
And the cat is out of the bag. Motion carries. Next up, we have Iowa Legal Aid MOU. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approves the Iowa Legal Aid MOU as presented.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion regarding the MOU? Some context, Dr. Murillo.
Yeah, Mr. Hamilton, would you join me? This is something Mr. Hamilton brought to my office in our last one-on-one, and I really feel like it's a great opportunity for our families, and he can give a little background on this.
Yeah, so the Iowa Legal Aid provides free services to families. They have been working within districts in Des Moines, I think Davenport, Cedar Rapids, to establish these school programs where they're essentially having an office in one of our school buildings. We have not determined where that is. We were waiting for board approval. But they're going to have office hours, so families who are in need, and I think I gave you a handout of what they are in need for, essentially domestic issues or housing issues or whatever it is that they may need legal services for, they're able to instantly gain some access to that legal advice and legal aid through Iowa Legal Aid, and they're doing it free for us and for our families.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
We're starting with one.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, okay. I was just wondering, for English language learners, will it be available to them as well? Okay.
Excellent. Anything further? No? Mrs. Straussky, please call our roll.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Dr. Ozello?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
The resolution passes. Next, we have district tractor replacements. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approves Agrivision Equipment Group for the purchase of 2 John Deere tractors for $145,203.72.
Second?
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board?
I appreciate that the selling price is less than the suggested list, so I think we did get a deal, so saving our taxpayer money, so thank you.
Sorry. And I believe the last time we purchased these tractors was 20 years ago, Mr. Stile?
Long time.
Yeah.
I
So-
think he provided an update
Yes.
with the last board meeting on facilities, that there are a few of our tractors needing replacement just because of age, so. And these come with a 3-year bumper-to-bumper warranty, which is fantastic. It'll help save on repairs and maintenance and all that stuff. Yes, yes, from plow to tire. And also, just to let you know, each tractor will have a snow blower, a heavy-duty broom, and a hydraulic rear blade for excellent snow removal. So, kids beware, our parking lots will be clear. Anything further from the board? Excellent. Mrs. Strauski, please call our roll.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes,
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Dr. Rosello?
Yes.
the resolution passes. This brings us to the purchase of a Polaris Ranger XP 1000 and 2025 Defender Pro Limited. Is there a motion?
Yeah. I move that the board approves Edwards Motorsports LLC for the purchase of Polaris Ranger XP 1000 and 2025 Defender Pro Limited, and to ProTech for the purchase of a Can-Am Steel Snowblade for a total amount of $77,653.76.
Excellent. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board?
No?
Excellent.
That's it.
Mrs. Strauski, please call our roll.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Dr. Rosello?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
And the resolution passes. Next up, we have approval of our budget guarantee. Is there a motion?
I move that the Board of Directors of the Council Bluffs Community School District approves the 1% budget guarantee request and may levy property tax for fiscal year 2025 to 2026 for the regular program budget adjustment as allowed under Section 257.14 Code of Iowa.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board regarding the budget guarantee? Dr. Miller, you want to give a quick explanation to the public on what that is?
Yeah.
The 1% budget guarantee is an annual board item that we do in case we have a decrease in enrollment. It guarantees that we get the same amount of budget that we have this year with a 1% increase. And it's kind of a safety net that all districts pass this board item annually.
Any other questions from the board? Mrs. Strauski, please call our roll.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Dr. Rosello?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
And the resolution passes. Next, we have request SBRC spending authority for the 24-25 special education deficit. Is there a motion?
I move that the Council Bluffs Community School District requests allowable growth and a supplemental aid payment for the special education deficit of $4,205,141.30 in the 2024-2025 school year.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board?
Clarification?
Dr. Merlin?
I'll give it a shot, and then if I don't quite get across the finish line, I'll ask Ms. Lehan to join me. But this is also something that every district is allowed to do annually. And special education deficit really comes down to the way special education is funded by the state. That is why they have this provision for districts to be able to move forward and go out and ask for the additional funding. As we look at our special education, there's a lot of different areas that we're really digging into this year. This will be the year now we no longer, had moved to Heartland, moved the students across to Omaha, did the busing, transportation, and really had that increase in all of those funds. We should see a decrease. We used to really come close to about 3 million a year. We jumped that million point when we made that transition. And the one thing that we're finding that we're really struggling with is outside placement. Because there's so few outside placement can cost anywhere from $12,000 a month to $17,000, $18,000, $19,000. And these are students that really need critical care that we can't provide. And so as those numbers continue to increase, and what we're finding now is if there's no change or growth by those students, their insurance is canceling them. And it's left on the burden of the district to pick up that cost. And so we're really, Ms. Leham, I've asked her to put together a budget for how much, because we do, driveway to school, a lot of buses that, even at Thomas Jefferson High School, a lot of special education buses. And so really beginning to look at our transportation, how many students we have in outside placement, looking at the FTEs, looking at the paraprofessionals that are being, cited in the IEPs, and just taking a good broad overlook and seeing where the significant cost immediately is transportation and outside placement. And so I know that Ms. Leham, you did look at other UEN districts, and we were right in line with how the other urban districts' increases have occurred. And so that is why I really believe the provision for the state is in place, because of what we're awarded for special education funding and what the cost is never lines up. So they allow us to ask for that, I guess, the SBRC to provide that allowable growth.
A good question. How has the voucher program affected our percentage of students who receive those special services? Because I know in the past, typically, we've seen numbers around 15% of our student population requiring or needing these specialized services. Are we seeing an increase in number of students that we serve? Because not only are we serving the students of the Council Bluffs Community School District, but we're receiving students from outside of district that the smaller schools don't have the resources to provide, and that the AEAs that are being dismantled will no longer be able to supply those or provide those services. How is that affecting our district? And are we disproportionately having to come up with the additional funding based on our what we have to offer to the communities around us?
Yes, that's a really great point, Mr. Kozar. What we saw last year was our special ed population was about 18%, and which most districts run about 10 to 11% max, but that is because we offer and take in from other districts, and that's another piece that I know that Lori's going to look at, because dollars do follow, but it doesn't cover the required services of special education. But it is the right thing to do. If you have a small district that has an autistic student and they don't have the means to service them, we do. And we will take them.
Right.
And so that is one of the pieces also. And that's why, because when I first got here, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe the federal government hasn't cited us for our population, but we can demonstrate why we have that population. And so we provide those services. So that also drives our cost up, because not all dollars follow when you have an open enroll-in.
So how do we rectify the deficit that we continue to that it continues to occur? Is it more of something that we as a community need to push toward our legislation to not just on a state level, but also on a federal level? If it's federal dollars that we need, is that something that we need to get our community behind to have our state and federal representatives support us? Because we're providing the essential work for those students that need that care and support most critically.
Yes, and I think, Ms. Kozar, that's the reason they put that provision in for the allowable growth and the supplemental aid payment. But what we'd love to see is that it comes in on the front end versus us carrying the burden of covering the cost and then requesting on the back end.
Right.
And at this point, I've not heard any conversation around increasing funding or weighted funding for special education. But I do know that as our students continue to grow in certain areas, that it will have to become a topic of conversation at some point where they begin to look at, and I would assume it's most of our large urban districts that are dealing with this. So maybe it's a collective conversation at the UEN, where our districts look at how can we push that to our legislators and begin to get a movement for that.
The services were required
Right.
by law to
They are.
provide.
They are.
And 20 years ago, when I came on the board, I remember that we had a $685,000 deficit spending for special education programs. And, Diane, I'm looking at,
You have a better memory than I do.
well, I was trying to, I can't, okay, it doesn't matter. But I mean, it's just that we as a board have let the community know that we will take students because it is the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. And so I'm not opposed. I mean, I'm in favor of supporting all students, regardless what community they live in. If their community doesn't have those resources, we do. And so and I believe it's the right thing to do for us to be able to offer those services to all students.
I think one thing that would really help us is if Iowa would look at outside placements. They've almost closed everything, and as you notice, a lot of our outside placement goes over to Omaha.
Yes.
And Iowa needs to revisit that, because I think that could also bring down cost. And it's in a place where we just don't have any options right now.
Yeah.
Is it the placements or is it the higher acuity of the placements that we're needing?
Both.
Both?
Yeah.
Okay. Just clarify. Oh, yes. More and
Yeah.
Excellent discussion, board. Anything further? Okay. Mrs. Strasky, please call our roll.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes,
Dr. Ozello?
Yes.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
and the resolution passes. Last on our agenda for resolutions, we have the approval of a revised job description. Is there a motion?
I move the Board of Directors approve the 2024-2025 school service agreement with VODEC and fee schedule for 2020.
Nope.
Am I on the wrong one?
Yep.
Yep.
Letter I.
You went down to consent agenda.
No, I moved.
Well, that happens.
Okay, how about if I move that the Board of Directors approve that revised, no, that ain't it either.
You're
I give up.
There you are.
Yes, I was right. Board of Directors approve the revised job description
Yes.
for facilities and maintenance support specialist, one as presented.
I will second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion
Okay, thank
regarding
you.
the revised job description? Mrs. Strasky, please call our roll.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Dr. Rosello?
Yes.
And the resolution passes. That brings us to our consent agenda, which is full of special education agreements. This goes back to a prior resolution that we were discussing. We have a VODEC service agreement renewal, Special Education Consortium Agreement, APEX, Special Education Amendment to the Transition Alliance Program, TAP, contract number 20 TAP 12 exhibits, Special Education contracts with Alpha School, Special Education contract with Prime Home DDS, Special Education contract with Ameriserve. Also our personnel agenda, financials for August, and disbursements for August. Is there a motion for our consent agenda?
I move that we approve our consent agenda.
Thank you.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Mrs. Straussky, please call our roll.
Yes, Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Dr. Rosello?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
And the consent agenda has been approved. And that closes our meeting. Thank you.
Ron Deming.
Oh, you were looking for a
I was
name.
looking-
Still got the over.
Okay.
I set her over under for 7:30. It was close. A lot of good discussion this evening.